I'm sorry that everyone has had to go through this process with us. Lord knows this isn't what we wanted either. We just wanted to conduct business lawfully.
It's the Poker News Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 949 of the Poker News Podcast presented by WPT Global. I'm Chad Holloway, joined by Mike Holtz and Ben Ludlow. An emergency session of sorts because less than an hour ago as we're recording this, Doug Polk released his video.
It has been a stressful past couple of weeks. On March 10th, the Lodge Card Club in Round Rock, Texas was raided by state authorities, primarily at the Texas Alcohol and Beverage Commission. This is a very complicated video to make for a variety of reasons. To start off with, there is an ongoing investigation into the Lodge Card Club in which I am specifically named. So of course I've had to be very careful with what I put out on the internet and get it all approved through the right channels.
I think it's pretty well received. I enjoyed it. I thought it hit the right marks, the right tone, given everything that's out there. Ben, Mike, initial thoughts on Doug Polk's video?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's just good to hear from Doug. I think we've all been waiting. You know, he put out a statement, but, you know, we're so used to seeing him on camera, used to seeing him on YouTube, so it's good that he finally figured out a way to release a statement.
It is important to briefly highlight once again that no charges have been filed yet. There have been no arrests. So at this point, they are currently looking into the case, one would assume. Now, there's an important date on the timeline here that people are not currently discussing, which is April 9th.
April 9th, this date is going to be really important, and that's that they have 30 days from the raid when they've seized assets and done what they've done and frozen bank accounts, etc., to officially file charges. So that's coming up. We're going to have some real answers here in the next 10 days. And I think the main thing that I learned was, you know, Doug still has tons of questions too. I don't think he has all the answers. I think they're waiting to see what happens just like we are. Obviously, we all have theories, but, you know, my main takeaway is that he's still a little bit in the dark, you know, and that this in the next 10 days, we're going to know a lot more than we know now, which is good because, you know, the initial thought is maybe this takes years, maybe something happens, you know, that this goes on forever and it's just sort of in this limbo of purgatory. But it's nice to know that good or bad, optimistic or pessimistic, we're going to have some real answers in the next 10 days.
We have our members that have millions of dollars in outstanding tournament prizes and chips that are going to have to eventually be paid out that I have personally guaranteed.
There was reassurance too by Doug that no matter what the case, no matter the timeline, that he's going to make sure that the players are made whole that have been affected, right? Those with outstanding balances, chips, and things like that, which I think was a big reassurance to a lot of people as well. He just asked that, give it time, let this whole thing play out first. So, Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's great that Doug is doing that. I think it's fantastic stuff. And I think that the timing of the video was perfect. It seems like his lawyers didn't want him to talk beforehand. He seems like he has some other stuff that he'd like to talk about, but he can't. And that's totally normal in a situation like this. April 9th being that date, I would expect charges to be filed before then. Generally, I've seen this happen before in other situations where they have 2 years to file charges and they wait literally until the last day and then they file charges. I've seen it happen several times. I think it's going to be a wait and see to see exactly what happened, but it's great that Doug is saying that no matter what happens, that he's going to reimburse all the chips, and that B, he said he wanted to debunk the theory that they definitely weren't going to reopen. He said that there's a good chance. I don't know if he said there's a good chance, actually. He just said that there's a chance that they will reopen depending on the outcome of the investigation. So I remain pretty hopeful and hopeful for Texas poker in general. The fact that the WSOP hasn't canceled their circuit yet, to me, means they must have some sort of inside information. Like, if they thought
Yeah, no, I mean, I wanted to harp on this. So this is a bit of a spoiler. Because of the timing of this, we have an episode coming out on Thursday where I interview Ryan Crow from Texas Card House about the World Series of Poker circuit. And it is a go. He told me, he confirmed it's a go. They feel comfortable about it. That is in the can. You can watch that on Thursday. I won't spoil too much, but it's a really good episode in terms of Ryan Crow sharing his thoughts on the current state of affairs in Texas Card House and how they feel given all this. And I'm going to echo your sentiments, Mike. It's a little change of tune for me in that I was very skeptical and pessimistic about the long-term outlook of all of this. But based upon things that I've heard since the last time we dove into this, after speaking with Ryan Crow and some other developments, I can't share everything, but I am much more optimistic than I was. I do think, and wouldn't be surprised that the lodge could reopen. I think that April 9th date does linger. I do think that there is a positive outcome to all of this. It's hard for me to share too much. Some of it is privileged information, but like there are some things that I've heard and learned that gives me, an optimistic outlook at this point. So fingers crossed. I didn't think that would have been possible if you would have asked me a week or two ago.
Is there a chance that the Lodge Austin could reopen? It's possible. But again, it really depends how this all plays out, particularly by that April 9th date. And I don't really know. These are great questions. Hey, Doug, I got some questions to answer. Happy to not answer them for you.
What I'm hearing behind the scenes, the people I've spoken to, kind of leads me in that direction. So,
and I think the thing that spooked everyone, of course, is obviously everything is spooky about this, and kind of like it's tough to run a business in Texas, a poker business in Texas right now, and not be worried. But I think when you let go all of your employees, that's like, oh shit, like this is over, it's all done. And I think that just, it's they have to do that to protect themselves, to allow their employees to go look for other work, to file unemployment. I don't think that if they knew it was going to reopen in a month or two, I think would have kept everyone on the payroll. But it was more about like allowing their employees to move on if they needed to in the short term. But like you said, if we're optimistic, then I fully expect that, maybe they're going to rehire everyone in a month or a couple months or whatever it is. So I think that's the piece that he was especially like, oh, guys, just because we had to let all our employees go doesn't mean that the Lodge isn't reopening at some point. And to his point as well, the Lodge San Antonio is still open and no other card rooms have been targeted. So part of one of our theories was that this was more of a federal thing, that perhaps that there's, the Banking Secrecy Act, all this stuff. And to his point, if it had been a federal thing, they probably would have gone after Lodge San Antonio as well, would have done a broader sweep of all of these things. So maybe it is just an isolated incident. Maybe it was just to set an example, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, along those lines, because he did bring me up in the podcast. I made my cameo appearance. Just because, so each state, as I understand it, each state has its own IRS and FinCEN representatives department, whatever you want to call it, that does operate under the Treasury Department, which is federal. Doesn't necessarily mean a federal case is going to be brought. It could just be that aspect of it. So I do think there could be that potential. So here's the thing. I don't think Doug or anybody associated with the Lodge intentionally, maliciously did anything wrong. Until their knowledge, they didn't. But hypothetically, based on a true story that happened in California, where somebody in the card room that was working was slipped some money by a customer saying, hey, here's some for you, just don't report this, right? And they got caught. But when I say report this, the Bank Secrecy Act, if there's so much money in transactions, they have to file reports by law, right? And I'm not saying that this happened, but hypothetically, if something like that happened, nobody would know. The ownership wouldn't know, but the authorities would if they traced it back, right? So I'm saying something like that could potentially exist that we don't know about, that Doug and them don't even know about at this point. We won't know until we hear further if there are charges or whatever. Just saying that could be something in the cards, if you will, because it has happened before in California. So, but he did address it. He doesn't think it is that, which is fair. He also addressed the other things, like he doesn't think it is outside influence from casinos in neighboring states, because why wouldn't they go after Houston or Dallas, which are closer? Makes sense. I would say also, you think there was one about Miriam Adelson, right? About the casino interest, but he doesn't think that it's that as well. Why not San Antonio Club as well? And he says he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know. And to my point, if it was a Bank Secrecy Act, if the infraction was only at the Round Rock location, and that's where the investigation is, they might not care. They might not even know about the operation in San Antonio. Who knows? Like, there's so little that we know, even that Doug doesn't know, and Doug knows more than we do, if that made sense right there.
Yeah, it does make sense, and hopefully we get more information. I mean, that's something that's clearly needed. And, I mean, in my opinion, let's hope that this goes well for the Lodge. I see nothing but negatives if it goes bad for them, for the poker community, and only positives if it goes well. If they get to reopen, I think you could even see a potential accidental poker boom where you almost get a Streisand effect kind of deal where they try to take away poker and we say, hey, fuck you, we're coming to play.
Because of the ambiguity and haphazard enforcement, we actually formed a 501c6 a few years ago called Texans for Texas Hold'em, where we brought legislation forward to try and clarify this so that we could clearly see what the boundaries are, and then bad actors would also be removed from the space.
I guess one of the other things that he talked about a lot that I didn't realize, I guess I realized a little bit, but it was nice to kind of get it reiterated and learn more, was about this Texans for Texas Hold'em, that they have a 501c6, is that, I think that's what it is, which is basically like, you know, they're trying to raise money and put more awareness out about what's going on in Texas, and that, you know, Texas Card House, all these people are working together. Because I think at the end of the day, like, he was discussing all these theories about competition, right? Like, oh, you know, maybe it's the TCH guys that are, you know, whispering in someone's ear and they know someone to try and get us shut down. But the reality is, you know, more poker in Texas is good for everyone. Like, that grows the market. If TCH Austin is doing well, the Lodge is doing well. I mean, it's one of those things where there's not, like, so much capacity ever that it's going to run out.
TCH and the Lodge have worked together to try and pass legislation at the state level under the 501c6 Texans for Texas Hold'em. When I see other clubs that are doing things the right way, while of course we're going to compete with them to try and take market share and get more games than they do, we are still happy to see other clubs doing poker the way that it should be done, instead of a lot of these illegal underground gambling rooms that we see across the state.
It's nice to know that everyone behind the scenes is working together in Texas to make this happen, and that it's really unlikely that it's some, you know, malicious thing by a competitor whispering in a judge's ear or an agent's ear and saying, oh, go raid these guys for this kind of thing. So
yeah, and I talked to, as I mentioned, Ryan Crow in our episode coming up on Thursday, and once you hear that conversation, you're going to realize that it couldn't be further from the truth, that they are in it together, so to speak, down in Texas in a lot of regards, and that they do join forces, that they do communicate. You know, Ryan Crow says he has been in touch with Doug throughout this. So, yeah, that one.
I do love the Luka theory, though, that this somehow has to do with the Luka trade and, you know, moving basketball out of Dallas, and that, you know, they're going to bring casinos to Dallas. I mean, it would just be awesome if this somehow all traces back to Luka Doncic. I really.
Yeah, Doug did say too in his video that, you know, his understanding is they're doing the two main charges essentially are illegal gambling and money laundering, and that the latter comes from the former, right? That if it is deemed illegal gambling, then therefore all the money involved would be considered money laundering. So really, in that lens, you focus on, is it illegal gambling or not? And it's hard to say yes in terms of the other clubs are continuing to operate. As Doug pointed out, that's been their business model from the get-go. Nothing has changed. They were granted a license by the TABC throughout it all. And so I would find it hard to believe that unless there was extenuating circumstances, for instance, people playing without a membership, right, that would negate the private aspect as we've talked about in the past. Or if there was, like I mentioned, maybe some unknown things going on with wire transfers or money or non-reporting, stuff that even ownership isn't aware of, but the authorities caught wind of, something like that, you know, could obviously turn it. But as the way they were operating, I don't think that, you know, there would be much of a case for illegal gambling. And if there's not much of a case for illegal gambling, therefore there would not be much of a case for money laundering.
When you hear money laundering and organized crime, you think of a very different thing than what is really going on here, as I understand it. In this situation, I believe what they're saying is that because we think this is illegal gambling, all of the transactions are thus money laundering, right? It's suspicious to have this much money going into a bank account. The Lodge has basically the highest stakes games in the state of Texas and does a lot to try and protect the players. The Lodge offers wires for people to go in and out so they don't have to take cash, right? It's easier for us to record, it's easier to give to the player, it's easy to report, it's just easier across the board.
We're assuming they're being charged with money laundering, so the card room itself was engaged in money laundering, right?
God forbid we get together and we play some poker as a group of men. We might even smoke some marijuana. Oh! Someone get the government! This is fucking ridiculous, dude. Come on. I mean, unless something crazy comes out and then I'll eat crow, whatever. But if this is just over them running a poker room the way it is, come on, what are we doing here?
I feel like so many other things since I've been in this industry, people don't have a grasp on poker and how poker works and how poker operates, and that they seen this card room, which by our standards was an upstanding, well-run organization trying to do things by the book, like Doug Polk said, and said, I think something is going on here, and I'm going to find it. And even if there wasn't, they're going to make something up to do it. Now, here's the issue is, once the authorities spend 2 years investigating, once they conduct a raid, once they seize millions of dollars, the government is not the type to go, our bad, whoops, here you go.
Oops.
Like, that's going to cost somebody their job, and that person is probably going to fight that tooth and nail. Like, they've got to save face one way or the other, right? And that's how oftentimes in these sort of situations there might be some sort of settlement. Like, hey, we can't just dismiss anything. How about you just pay this fine, and then we settle it, and everybody is happy and win-win. I don't know if something like that will happen in this case, but that is par for the course in a lot of different industries, if you will. I just know, like, it's not on the government to say, whoops, we're sorry about that. Yeah. Like, they have to come out looking good.
The biggest thing that I'm wondering, though, is say they bring charges, say all this happens. Like, how does this change how other rooms are operating in Texas? How does this change how, maybe they get a fine and then they reopen? Like, what is different now after all of this? Like, are they taking away their liquor license? I mean, that is the one thing that's sort of tying all this together, especially since it's the TABC that's coming after them. I fail to see how anything changes or how you operate differently to avoid this in the future. Like, if I went and asked TCH or, Ryan Crow, obviously we got that interview coming on Thursday, but like, how does this change how you operated? They probably said nothing. I mean, maybe they're a little bit more careful about checking, memberships and all that. But to Doug's point on this, and it's the same at TCH, I've played at both places, you can't play because if you don't have an active membership, the way Poker Atlas works, the way all their systems work. So I just fail to understand, like, how this changes anything going forward about how people are operating and how poker in Texas is operating. And it just, that's what I'm confused about, is like, what is the outcome? What is what changes? Nothing, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, I think there could be positive outcomes in this in terms of...
Yeah, exactly. That's that's what I was trying to,
Yeah, so like, number one, all the clubs have to double down on their being careful, right? Making sure memberships are enforced and all that. Like, that'll be a good thing. That should be happening. Be extra diligent. But unless it comes out that there was some grand conspiracy, that there was, extreme money laundering and nefarious activity that really would just shine a really negative light on it, if it is what we think it is, and like this was a poker room that was just operating in government overreach, overzealous authorities, and depending on whether or not charges are brought, like imagine no charges do come, or there is a small settlement and the lodge does reopen. That would not only be a great thing in terms of poker players, poker employees being back in business, but just from a public perception moving forward of, hey, we had this precedent, you raided this card club, there was nothing there, they're actually doing things right, they reopened, it's business as usual. Like, it almost legitimizes it in a little bit more of an aspect, if that all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
No, it makes sense to me completely. But the only thing I'll say is the way that the government acts these days, you never know what could be happening anymore. They could come through and just say, yeah, cool. One thing I will say real fast, if they do make a settlement, I don't think they'll be able to reopen, correct?
I mean, I guess it would be up to whatever the terms of the settlement might be. I'll harken back to the Oak Card Club in California that I referenced in the bank secrecy episode, last week, I think it was. But they did reopen. Well, they continued to operate throughout it. That's one of the downfalls here, is the lodge isn't getting that benefit. They don't have any income coming in. Others who have faced these sort of things or have been raided have resumed operations, if you will. So,
but that was the lodge's choice to stop operating, right?
Yes, and I mean, yes, based on what we know or from what Doug said in the past, like they were basically told, like, I wouldn't if I were you, if that makes sense. Like,
oh, of course. I mean, the fact that people have been rated like this and continue to operate is much crazier than their choice, in my mind, to pause operations for a while and figure this all out. I mean, the last thing you want to do is get rated and continue unknowingly doing the same thing that you were doing that you got yourself in trouble in the first place. So,
yeah. I think that it would have been foolish to try to reopen without knowing more, and we still need to know more. Like Doug said in his video, like, they're still waiting, which is kind of crazy. Like, after all this, all these people who are now out of work.
When I saw that we had let go of the employees, I did feel a little bit upset for our people. You know, I got to really know a lot of these guys over the course of the last few years, and these are good, hardworking people, a lot of very talented dealers, and it's extremely sad to see them lose their jobs over what is still even unclear what happened.
Kudos to Doug for being patient and composed as he was, for saying no matter how this pans out, that the lodge is going to make players whole, and if they don't, then I personally will, you know, and taking on that 7 figures in responsibility. And it's frustrating. We don't know more. It's reassuring to hear from Doug. It's reassuring to know that players will, at the end of the day, will be made whole. But he did reference, like, we don't know if this is going to take weeks, if it's going to take months, if it is going to take years, because all timelines are on the table right now. I do think, though, because of that April 9th date, we're going to hear things sooner than later, or at least some updates. And based upon some rumblings that I'm kind of hearing behind the scenes, I think, you know, we'll hear something within the next week or so, you know, before that April 9th deadline. We'll for sure hear more within the next month, is kind of what I'm thinking. And for better or worse, you know, I guess is the way I'll leave that. It's a cliffhanger. I wish I could share more. I know that I've taken both sides of this, where I've thought one thing and now I'm thinking of another. All I can say is it's a constantly changing world. You learn more information, you talk to people, you talk to sources, and you revise your thinking when you get more information. And, you know, I've been privy to more information since the last few shows, and not saying that it's going to happen, but when I thought there was, you know, a drawing dead sort of situation compared to now, I think there could very well be a positive outcome to this. Fingers crossed. That's what I'm pulling for at this point.
Yeah. We also learned that Doug is super fucking rich, that he's just guaranteeing all this himself. Not that we didn't know that, but like, he's like, guys, it's fine. I got you.
We're going to be back on Thursday with a new episode 950, in which we'll talk to Ryan Crow, the CEO of Texas Card House. It was a very good conversation. We talk about the upcoming poker documentary that he was involved in that talks about the battle for Texas poker. We talk about the lodge and the raid and what Texas Card House thought when it was happening, and how they've planned accordingly since, and what the future holds for the WSOP circuit stop that's coming up there. So another episode that you won't want to miss. Ben, Mike, final thoughts on Doug's video and kind of the situation with the lodge, you know, after his video came out here.
Michael?
Good luck, Lodge. I hope the employees. Well, I'm serious. Good luck, Lodge. I hope they do well. I hope they reopen. I hope the government gets 2 fingers stuck right up their asshole, and not in a pleasurable way. And I hope it goes well for Doug. You know, and that's the truth of it. That's me spitting the real facts.
I think, to your point, Chad, I'm more optimistic the longer this goes on, in terms of the future of Texas poker, them being able to reopen all of this stuff. So I hope that I'm right.